Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to Focus on Liberia, where we talk everything finance and economics. My name is Gabriel. Welcome to another session of the marketplace. I'm here today with my co-host, and again, we're fortunate to be joined with Dr. Gompu. We've been doing a series on the budget, right? Initially, when we started, I think a few weeks ago, we talked about the budget in an overview. We had two sessions on the revenues, right? We talked about we had a guest as well. We had Sebastian, and we had Dr. Gompo last week, and today we're fortunate to have him on this session as well. This part we're going to be focusing solely on the expenditure side, right? So 2 sessions we talked about the revenue side, right? Where the money comes from, the process in which the government collects revenues, right? Now, this session today, we're going to be talking about the components of the expenditure side of the budget. So again, as always, my name is Gabriel Carter. I'm the co-host here with Mr. Cuffy. Cuffy.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, welcome, and please introduce yourself for our guest today.
Thank you. Again, this is Alex Cuffy. I'm here as the managing consultant for Allen Bernard, and we are in partnership with Focus on Liberia, bringing you on the show. And as Gabriel said, we will be delving into the expenditure part of the budget. So that's the show for today. And he rightly also gave a background and highlight of what we've been doing. And then also I'd like to look at in the future. So next Saturday, we'll also be continuing with the expenditure. And then the following Saturday, we'll continue with the real analysis. That is how the budget performed. We'll be looking at the possibility to grow the revenue and possibility to reduce the debt, or what, those strategies. So we'll be having a panel discussion. We'll try to bring other people here to kind of discuss the way forward. So that's what we'll be doing again. Again, welcome Dr. Gompu to the program as we continue discussing the budget. Again, here on Focus on Liberia, we are here to discuss educate and bring you
Promote.
the information as it is with objectivity and not to criticize
Yep.
or to be for or against the government of the day or the previous government. This is not the place for it. This is the place to discuss objectively, to look at the issues that are surrounding our country. On this segment, we're talking about the budget and
Yep.
particularly the expenditure side of things.
Yep.
Thank you.
Dr. Gumpo,
Yes.
welcome again. Thank you for joining us. I know you're busy, man, but thank you for taking your time to join us here. We appreciate it. Thank you for being with us last week as well. But again, I think you're a regular here, so I don't. Everybody know you, but for those that are joining us today, we would like you to introduce yourself. Well, before they do, if you're with us right now, watching the show right now, please take your time, take one few, probably 2 or 5 seconds, share with your audience, invite people. As we said, we like to, we're not presenting ourselves as experts. We know what we know, but we're not presenting ourselves as experts. Challenge us. Prepare your comments. Bring your comment. We could be learning from you. You could be learning from us. So take a moment, share the show with your friends and family, and come in and learn about the budget. I know a lot of people shy away from numbers. It becomes kind of a taboo, but we over here we don't shy away from numbers. We talk about it. We look at the analysis, and we look at it objectively. So share it and take an hour. Just sit down with us and let's enjoy the show. Dr. Gumpu, please introduce yourself for our audience.
Yeah, thank you, Gabriel and Alex. I am pleased to be here. This is an opportunity to discuss and to share ideas on the budget. My background is in economics.
Yeah.
I have worked in industry. I've worked in the government sector, and I serve as Deputy Minister for Budget at the Ministry of Finance for a few years. And I have taught economics and statistics for a period of years, and for a period of time, and at university and college level as well. And I've taught at the University of Liberia as well. So I'm pleased to be here and to share perspective on the expenditure side of the budget as you have scheduled for today. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And again, welcome and welcome to Focus on Liberia as we will dive into what we're going to be talking about today. Again, we want this to be interactive, as I said. So uh, have your questions, call in. At one point, maybe later on, we will open the phone lines for people to call in. But comment, have your questions. And as we discuss, there will be a time we will take time to respond to your comments and as we go along with the show. But again, thank you for taking your Saturday for an hour. Just join us and let's learn from each other. Thank you, Alex.
Yes, sir. So we'll answer it, put the summary of the budget on the board so that we can have a look at it, and then we will take it from there. All right, there you have it. So the expenditure side of the budget, this is just a rough summary. Again, the figures were drawn from the Ministry of Finance website, and then from document to document, sometimes the figures can be different depending on whether the budget are trend or the projection. But these figures are a representation of the approved budget as per the 2020-2021 budget and the 2019-2020 budget that we got from the Ministry of Finance. So this is just a summary of that. And as you can see there, for 2020-2021, the total budget projection was 570 million, and these figures are in millions. So that is 570 million, of which we have there's something they call the recurrent expenditure. That is what happens all the time, and then the contingent. But this time we don't have a contingent expenditure. So that is expenditure based on if something happens, if this condition is met, and things like that. So right now we have the recurrent expenditure and the public sector investment plan. And the public sector investment plan, let me just throw a little light on it. It's not development project, road building, or things like that, but it's those things that kind of affect everybody, such as let's say if they were having population sensor, the money that will be used for population sensor will be put in that area. The the refurbishment or rebuilding of the executive mansion, for example, that would be put in there. Anything that has to do with exogenous thing, COVID relief or something like that. Those kind of projects that tend to kind of affect everybody. Relocation of the market, for example, now that they move from the rail light to the Omega market, those kind of things, that's what we call public sector investment. It's not road building or building new ministries or things like that. That will fall under the infrastructure sector of the budget. So the recurrent in this stage is the everyday expenses. So here now we have the salary, which is the compensation of employees. So that is everybody that work within the ministry, within the government, all ministry of entities put together, all the employees. This is what they pay. Goods and services are those things that they buy, whether it's pens and papers, if we call it stationaries, or everyday things that they consume at the different ministry and agencies. And then grants, things that they give to other institutions, non-financial assets, social benefits, and then the debt repayment. So you can see there, the compensation of employees is the biggest one. For the last 2 years, compensation of employees was 51% and 56% of the overall budget, which is huge. And then next to that, as you can see there, is it hovers between debt repayment and goods and services. So grants come in fourth place. So those are things that that we will be talking about today, and maybe at this stage I can ask my other colleagues to put a word. Gabriel, do you have a word to put in there? Oh, Gabriel,
you are muted.
Gabriel,
Sorry about that. Yeah, thank you for covering the that slide. I think you did a good job going over the expenditure part of it in its entirety. The debt, I just want to point out that the debt piece of it, we won't go into it in detail because we will go over it the next Saturday. Hopefully we can gather enough data on that to be able to cover it. But looking at the expenditure summary itself, I think there's a lot that can be gleaned from it. And I want to say something. In as much as we're looking at the figure, right? That's the number side. A professor once told me something that you can look at the numbers. The numbers can be telling you one thing, but also you can leave from behind the numbers and look at the situation at hand to make sure that both align. So that's the number we just present to you. Those are the numbers we're presenting to you there. We will be going over them in details, but also what we'll be doing as well, we'll be comparing them to the actuality, the reality that is happening within the country, which is the reflection of what the budget, the expenditure, and everything that encompasses was supposed to do. Not in an attacking way, but objectively to make sure that we don't want to just I have this saying that people, numbers don't lie, but sometimes people use numbers to lie, right? We don't want to present numbers to you and they're not reflecting the reality of what's happening. I can tell you that I'm making, such and such amount, but in reality, I couldn't, when you look at me, you won't be able to tell that, right? So we want to give you the analytical parts, but also merge that analytical part with the reality of what's happening on the ground. So I just wanted to throw that in there before we go further into it. So again, thank you for covering that. I would like to invite our guest in, Dr. Gompu. Do you have any comments on what we just show on the data, the change, the variation too? There's a lot of variances there from the year before and the current year, right? In specific area, you may not have it right now. We'll put it on the board for you again. You may not have it right now. We'll put it on the board for you. So there's a lot of variances, some increases, some decreases. We just want to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I think overall I can say that I would say that the expenditure side of the budget is important, and this is what equip the expenditure side equip government in its functions in terms of providing the tools and providing the human capital in enforcing the law, in making the law, in interpreting the law. That's what the various branches of the government do. So these are critical. What's happening on the expenditure side is critical to the functions of government. And clearly, the numbers are important, and in a way, the structure of the numbers can also be an indicator of government priorities in terms of
Yep.
Where the government emphasis is.
Yeah.
So that's another lesson that could be learned just by looking at the number and the distribution of the entire expenditure side.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you. I just wanted to go a little bit deep. Anthony, would you mind putting that on the screen again, please? Yes, perfect. All right. So without, trying to, I just wanted to go a little bit in details here, right? So if you, again, Alex did a great job covering that, right? So what I wanted to look at here are the variances, right? The variances mean the difference between both years, right? We're only looking at 2 years right now. So if you look at the comps, the employee compensation, right? There was what I call an improvement in there, right? Last year they were 56.5. This year they're down 51.2%. So that's about 5.3% decrease. So that's great, right? And then you look at the goods and services, there's also an improvement there. Less than a percentage point, right? 13.7 this year, they're about 13%, right? You look at grants, we also had last year we had a lot, we had enough in grants, right? We had a much going towards grants, right? So we have 40. Last year was 57.7. This year we I think it's about 10% difference or so, right? Actually 3% if you look at it. So that's great. We're not giving out too much grants. And if you look at the non-financial sector, there's also this improvement. In its entirety, if you look at the budget, from what we're seeing here, it reflects the actuality, right? If that's exactly what's happening, then I mean, there's some level of improvement there, because from the year before, we're seeing a lot of improvement, right? The expenditure has improved from the year before. Overall, if you look at it, it has improved from a year before. What I want to put in a greater context is this, right? Even though the expenditure has improved, right? It was higher last year. This year's is lower from cost point to cost point perspective, right? We also had an increase in revenues. So from a long-term standpoint, if you're looking at this from a long-term standpoint, right? If they continue down this path, right, where you continue to increase revenues, right, but you continue to cut costs, expenses, year over year, this was great, right? You continue to cut expenses year over year. there could be a time where that we will start seeing some impact in the in improvement in some places. Some of that could be allocated in different areas to make use of the reduction in expenses, right? So that's what I want to point out. Overall, we're looking at an improvement from the last year budget here on the expenditure side. And if this continue in a positive, like a year over year, maybe the next 3, 4, 5 years, that could be a significant improvement within what the government can do, considering that they continue to raise revenue, year over year, and they continue to keep that cost down low as well. Yeah.
Yeah, I have some reservations there.
Yeah.
I think on the compensation side, you could say improvement. But on the goods and services side, I wouldn't call that improvement. Because remember that, first of all, the compensation is way overblown.
Okay.
This is unusual for government budget, government expenditure budget, to be spending more than half of total expenditure on compensation.
Mm-hmm.
So when you compare the previous year to the most recent year, I mean, going from 56% to 51%, just 5%. And you are aware of the pressure that was brought on by the IMF.
Yeah.
You know, that the spending is overblown and that spending has to be brought under control, especially on the wage side. I mean, why does it have to take the IMF to tell you that your spending is overblown? You know, giving giving the amount of revenue you're collecting.
Right.
So I agree with you when you say that, you know, the 5% reduction is an improvement on the compensation side, but I just 5%. It's still over 50%.
Right.
And normally we expect to see that around 30%.
Right.
Okay, so now but look at goods and services. Goods and services is what these employees that you have hired need to get the work done. And across government agency, people are saying they do not have supplies.
Right.
There are no supplies. They can't do work. So they get paid, but people are even walking away from the job because they're saying there's nothing in the office to do because they don't have supplies.
Right.
So is that an improvement? I don't think so. To reduce, you know, the goods and services where you hire the people, you pay them, but they don't have equipment to do the job.
Right.
So you got labor and you're cutting back on the supplies. I don't see that as an improvement.
Right. So, you know, I agree with you on that, because if you look at it, it's just less than a percentage point. That's why I didn't really, you know, really, I agree. Even though it's an improvement from the year prior, I don't really consider it a significant improvement because it's less than even 1%, right? But you know, one thing I also want, I don't want to get too deep into it because as I mentioned earlier, we mentioned earlier that we're going to cover it next segment as well. Is the debt, you know, the debt services. It is a what I want to call catch-22, right? Last year it was $61 million, right, to spend on debt. That's massive, right? If you do the math with the amount of revenue we collected this year, it gone up to 92, let's say technically 92 million dollar, right? The reason why I say it's a good and it is a catch-22 is that we spend enough to pay to pay. That means we're paying enough. We're paying down on our debt. The reason why that is a good thing is because, you know, hopefully we can continue paying down on this debt and not, you know, become debt ridden and get us to the place where we were probably 10, 15 years ago again. But the negative side of it is that it's also eating into the revenue that we've collected massively, right? Without going too much into it, I think there could be a lot of improvement on that area as well in terms of what we think the government can do to as part of solution to reduce the amount of money to spend on the debt, right? But overall, I like what they're doing. That's a huge. It's like they're paying it down heavily. Hopefully they continue down that trend and continue raising revenue to pay it down and get out of debt, because that could have a lot of implication, positive implication of what that means, positive impact, what they can do once they pay down their debt to a certain level. So I wanted to highlight that area as well. I like that piece of it. Yeah.
Yeah, but okay, go ahead, Dr. Gumbo.
Yeah, can we put the slide up again? Let's look at this debt figure. Emphasize the debt situation.
Yeah, let me. Okay, there it is. Yeah. So if you look at it, it's 61 million, 2019, 2020, and it gone up to 93 million, right?
Right.
So that's technically 30 million, right? Additional. Now that could be.
So why is it an improvement?
It's an improvement because I think they're significantly paying down their debt, and the reason why I think is an improvement is because given I don't want to get too much into the budget because I want us to cover it next segment, right? The average debt on the government, the average interest rate on the government debt is about 17%. Now that's average. You are in statistics, you know that, right? Average, there could be some that are even lower as 2%. There could be some that's higher than that, 17%, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now, the reason why I say it's positive is because if they continue to pay down on this debt, right? That means they're overall it will create a lot of positive impact. Positive impact meaning that if you continue to pay down the debt to a certain level, you can go on the international market now, right? You can go and re-borrow money at a cheaper rate. Currently, right now, we know the interest rate is low, even though we know that within the next year the rates are going to start going back up and it's going to be higher to get cheaper debt on the market. The reason why I think this is positive is because the government can do a lot once they start paying down their debt, once they pay it down to a certain level. This is why I think it's positive. This is why I think it's positive.
Okay. Look, let me say this. Yeah, I mean, if the assumptions you're making are correct, in terms of debt payment, meaning that the debt is reducing, then maybe you could go in that direction. Yeah. But just looking at a rise in debt payment doesn't necessarily mean that your debt level is going down. You see, because what you're looking at is the debt service for that year alone. You're not looking at where the debt is right now. So you have to look at the debt figure to see whether the debt is coming down. You see, it could be that they're borrowing so much, and therefore the debt service obligation is rising. You see? So, and that may not necessarily be a good thing that your debt service obligation as a proportion of your total budget is rising. Because if your debt payment is rising due to reckless borrowing, then it means there's less money available for agriculture, there's less money available for investment, there's less money available for the security sector as well. So what we're looking at, to me, is incomplete.
Let me make one correction. There were two assumptions made. The last time I checked the budget, the last year budget, which was just in July, right? The total debt on that was $1.5 billion, right? And to a point, I think I agree with you to a point. The reason being because I agree with you because the debt service on that $1.5 billion was $34 million.
Okay.
So if you go from $34 million to 93, that means then your assumption is right. That means they may have borrowed enough money that now the debt servicing is up, right? But given what we're seeing, if everything remains constant, I mean, if the debt service is still total debt is still at $1.5 billion and they're making that significant payment, that means that additional $30 million could be going towards interest. I mean, towards principals, right? Which could help them pay it down quicker. That's the assumption that I made. But yes, I do agree with you on that aspect as well. Yeah.
Yeah. So unless we see the level of the debt, remember, I mean, in 2018, in 2017, what was the debt level?
Right.
And what is the debt level now? So if the debt level is rising rapidly, then your debt service obligation will also rise.
Right.
And that may not necessarily be a good thing for your overall budget. You will suffer in other areas because you are required by the international community to meet your debt service obligation first. You see, I don't think the government is doing this voluntarily because they want to pay down their debt. It could be just because of the international obligation that to continue borrowing, you cannot default on your debt.
Right.
So this kind of significant rise in payment obligation just within a 1 year period, I don't think it's a very good sign.
It's alarming. I agree with you. I absolutely agree with you. I agree with you. But without getting too hell bent on the debt aspect, I want us to just go over.
Gabriel, this is a topic that we plan for next week.
Yes. I don't want to get hung up on it. Yes.
Like time on discussing something we'll be discussing next week. So today we're trying to highlight the summary budget. Mm-hmm. And then look at the movement just for 2 years, just to see where the composition is, what is making up the total budget. We'll also do a sectoral, look at the sectors, the different sectors of the government, and we'll also look at some of the entities that are really at least more than 5% that they're spending more than 5% of the budget on. Then, but let's come back to Gabriel, what you're talking about yes, you see the expenditure is a function of the revenue. Mm-hmm. Because now this is government accounting and this is fund accounting. It has to have a zero balance at the end of the day. So what you collect is what you spend. Right. So last time we talked about the revenue, the movement of the revenue, the sort of the up and down movement of revenue, and we already agreed, we already understand that the revenue 5 years back we know that it was 600 million, and as we go along, there's a decrease, there's an increase, and at least in 2020, 2021, it was 570 million. Yeah. So it seems to be more than 2019, 2020. Right. However, there's still room for improvement because 5 years ago, it was 600 million, mm-hmm. and now 2020, 2021, which is our now, mm-hmm. because the current budget is the 6 months budget, so we can compare it to this one. So the revenue, there's still room for improvement for the revenue, but for now, we're talking about expenditure, and expenditure is definitely a function of the revenue that you collect. You can't spend more than what you collect. Mm-hmm. So the better the revenue, the better the expenses. The expenditure. So, like Dr. Gompo said, there's been a concern with the expenditure. Right. The expenditure hovering around 60%, at least now it is 51% in 2021, 2021. Again, Dr. Gompo alluded to the fact that some of the measures that have been proposed by the IMF and that it was occasioned with the
may have triggered
the harmonization, right? The harmonization in quotes. So right now, but nevertheless, the expenditure side of the budget with respect to compensation is still high. That is at least 50% of the government's budget. Yeah. So more than half of the government budget is just going to salaries payment, right? Salaries, allowances. Despite the harmonization that went on, the government budget, government revenue is going more to compensation of employees. Mm-hmm. Now, then also goods and services. Of course, the entities have to run. There are a lot of entities that are in government. Mm-hmm. So somebody is asking a question here. So where are education and health budget captured?
Should we look at the sectors?
Viewers is asking that question. And health budgets captured. Where is the investment budget? Liberia is, okay, let's leave that part. He says that Liberia is going nowhere. But he wants to know. So I'll ask. Let's look at the what is the composition. Yeah, we know now that the summary of the budget is made up of compensation of employees, goods and services, debt payment, and the other items. That also include the public sector investment plan. We also already discussed that the public sector investment plan is not necessarily development. It's not road building. It's not building houses and stuff like that. It is about maybe some emergency relocating people from one market to the other, build the money that is spent on the executive mansion repairs and those kind of things. That's where those monies are going. So it's not there. So let's look at the different sector. If Ansari will put the sectors on the board, the different. So the sectors are made up of So public administration sector. Now, in each of these sectors, there are entities. There are different ministries and agencies that are involved here, and we'll try to do a breakdown. So, public sector, it is public sector, public administration sector. Then we have the security and rule of law. Then we have the education sector, the health sector. So, for example, the public administration sector is made up of the national legislature, the Ministry of State for Presidential Affairs, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, the Ministry of Finance, the Liberia Revenue Authorities, the Civil Service Agency, and other entities that are involved in this. Of course, security and rule of law sector is obvious. We know is the Ministry of Justice, is the judiciary branch of the government, the Ministry of National Defense, National Security Agency, Executive Protection Services of the Executive Mansion, the people that take care of the president, and then the others. Then we have the education sector. Of course, the education sector will include the Ministry of Education, the University of Liberia, the William V. Stutman University, Morelia Consolidated School System, and all the different school systems, all the community colleges, and everything that has to do with education. Then we have the health sector, of course, the Ministry of Education, Ministry of Health, the JFK Medical Center, the National Public Health Institute, the Jackson F. Doe Hospital, and all the different hospitals that are around the country, government, hospitals that are around it. Then we have the what we call the infrastructure and basic services sector. That infrastructure and business services sector is where the infrastructure development is. So that includes what? Ministry of Public Works, which is the biggest, all right? And the Ministry of Transport and everything that everybody has to do with infrastructure and basic service. Then we have the municipal government and so forth, the transparency and accountability, where GSC and IAA, the Internal Audit Agency, the anti-corruption. Then we have the energy and environmental sector, where you have, of course, the Ministry of Mines and Energy, the environmental protection. Then you have the social development. The social development. What is the social development? Social development services sector. That is the Ministry of Youth and Sports, the Ministry of Gender, the Liberia Agency for Community Empowerment, the LIST, what we call a LIST. Then you have the Industry and Commerce. And then you have the agriculture sector, which includes the Ministry of Agriculture, the Central Agricultural Research Institute, and so forth. Now, if you see, I'm going to put that on the board again.
Please.
If you see that, look at that and see. For 2 years, look where agriculture is. Agriculture make up about 1% of the budget.
1.1 year over year.
1% of the budget, 2 year going. Of course, our health sector make up 12% of the budget, at least 12% of the budget. Our education sector make up at least 14% of the budget. The security sector make up at least 14% of the budget. Public administration make up the biggest. And what did we say public administration is composed of? Public administration makes up the biggest. The National Legislature, the Minister of State for Presidential Affairs, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, the Ministry of Finance, and of course the Ministry of Finance that makes up the biggest brunt of the budget. So then the Liberia Revenue Authority, of course, they collect the money, so you will expect that they will spend more money there as well. The Civil Service Agency and all the other public administration sector agencies. That is 37% of the budget. As compared to infrastructure and basic services, that is constructing roads, putting lights. That is the infrastructure and basic civil service, water, and all those things. So that's the composition of the budget when it comes to the sector. As just to answer your question, Jimmy Eastman, if you're still listening to the program, that's the sector. That's the sectoral analysis of the budget. So I will let Gabriel or Dr. Gompu to take over.
I like that, Dr. Gompu. We would like to hear your thought. I know both of you guys had experiences.
Yeah, I think this. I mean, there's a lot of information that has been presented here. I think Alex did a good job in identifying the entities within those sectors.
Right.
But when we look at the numbers and look at the movements in the numbers, I see some disappointment. I feel somewhat disappointed because, I mean, the government is emphasizing pro-poor
agenda
approaches or pro-poor agenda.
Yeah.
Okay, and most of our people, especially rural people, live on agriculture. Agriculture is one of the biggest employer of our people. But agricultural proportion in the budget is 1.1%. And that has not changed. And then when you look at education, I mean, it's important for you to look at it in terms of those percentage distribution. See, education percentage declined from 15.3% to 13%. So how are we going to get people out of poverty if we're putting less of our spending in education? Even look at security as well. Security.
I was going to touch on that, but thank you.
It's about the same, but there's a decline as a percentage of the total budget. And at the same time, we see a significant jump. Well, not that significant, but a jump in the public administration sector. So, and then, so police officers are complaining about logistics. People try to report on crime, and police officers are telling you, we don't have transportation to go after the criminal. If you want us to go after these people, provide, bring a car, provide transportation. So, I mean, how would the public respond to that? The usual response is not to even report on crime,
right?
Because you end up spending more.
Right.
I had a situation where someone basically hijacked, or hacked my Facebook account,
right,
and changed my password, and was going to different people and taking loans in my name. And that money was being sent to Liberia, and people were in Liberia collecting those money from Western Union, MoneyGram, and other places. They were using local phone numbers to go and collect those money. When I tried to bring the issue to the police attention, they said they were aware of it. But then people who were working with me on the ground were very reluctant and basically told me, do not even try, because you end up having to pay the police before they can even help you. And that kind of culture is developing. So, we need to shift some of the resources to make sure that our law enforcement, is provided the resources they need to do their work. We cannot keep, raising public administration. When we go deeper into the budget, you will see some of the reasons why the public administration sector is raised. Because it is because there was $3.6 million that was put in that sector. A very strange line, new line. While civil servants pay were being cut, $3.6 million were put in that public administration sector to provide funds to the legislature for something called legislative engagement. And what is that? $3.6 million.
Yes,
so that
right.
would have been a factor too that explained this jump in the public administration sector. Because you look at it, put the slide back up, see how many sectors are going up. Agriculture didn't go up.
Right.
Education didn't go up.
Yeah.
Security didn't go up, but public administration went up. So I think those are some lessons to gather as we look at the data.
Yeah. No, thank you. I think you guys did a good job going over that. A piece that I wanted to talk about is I think you single-handedly just talked about that, the security and the rule of law. And the reason why I wanted to talk about that is because we've all know about the killing that's happening in Liberia right now. People want to associate whether it's ritualistic or what type of murders that's currently happening in the country. The point of the matter here is that there's not enough task force or the president or whoever's in charge putting a task force together, say this is alarming, this is going to reflect on the image of the country. Let's put a task force together to investigate these murders or ritualistic killing, right? But I think you did a good job explaining on that. $80 million, right? Security and rule of law. Security and rule of law, right? If you can secure the people in the country, the citizens don't feel safe in the country, you cannot have tourists coming into that country, right? They will feel afraid to even go about their daily activities. As I said, I was recently in Liberia. People go in their homes by 6 o'clock just because of these killings that are happening in the country. Yet still we have $80 million going on security and the rule of law. Now, one person to say this killing happened in this community, we were able to investigate it and we're able to find somebody accountable of those murders. Now we're going to start going after the rest of them. At least just one person, hold one person accountable for these killings. Not one, but yet still we have 80 million spent on security and rule of law. Another piece that I think showed that a body cover on Focus on Liberia on Sundays, Leo. Education. If you look at the education within our country, you guys, I know you guys have been following the issues with the University of Liberia, where it's currently technically shut down. People are not going to school because of the condition of the schools, right? Yet we have $79 million on education. I mean, the argument is that, hey, they're providing free education, so there's no need for them to take care of the facility. Or if you don't take care of the facility, the people won't want to go to school, right? So if as we look at the budget, this expenditure in its entirety, yes, there's room for a lot of improvement, right? We don't want to be too harsh on the government. We understand that, depending on, who you have around you and how people manage money around you, things could be challenging. But at the end of the day, the data is perfectly aligned with what's the reality that is currently happening in the country. You look at the numbers are telling you there's not good improvement in the and on how we spend our money. And if you look at the condition that is being reflected in the lives of the people in the country, it's actually painting the same picture as well. In statistics, we call correlation. When two things are correlated, we said there's a problem. Yes, we know correlation does not equal actuality, but we know in this case they do make sense, right? The numbers tell the story, and the lives of the people, the things that are happening in the country do paint the same picture as well. The same thing with transportation, right? $26 million. You go in, as I said, you just go in the country and drive around in the street. Go look at various transportation sectors, the means of transportation, right? So in its entirety, we look at these things and they paint the very good picture that there's a serious room for improvement. There's room for improvement to be made in the budget, in terms of how the government make their money specifically, but also how we spend it and make sure how it gets enough for every dollar that it spends as well.
Yeah, there's a question. There's a question that Jimmy Eastman is asking, and I want to throw that to Dr. Gumpu after I look at some figures here. So he says Liberia is spending 2.6% of GDP on education. The recommended amount is 6%. What do you just think about this trend? But I like to hold it there, just for your thought. Again, if I repeat the question, is it about Liberia is spending 2.6% of its GDP on education. The recommended amount is 6%. What do you guys think about this trend? Now, looking at that, in the education sector, right, of the budget, before Dr. Gumpu addressed Eastman's question, the education sector of the budget makes up at least about 13-14% of the budget. The previous year, it was about 15-16%, right, of the entire budget, which is 79 million, at least 79 million this year, and when we say this year is 2020, 2021, and
right.
Last year, which is 2020, 2019, it was $83 million. The education sector on the chart of the different sector is the third relative to the total budget. That is standing at least around 14%. Now, Ministry of Education is getting about 41 million this year, and last year it got about 44 million.
Right.
University of Liberia got about, these are budget numbers. These are not the actual expenditures. These are just the budget number. 16 million University of Liberia this year, and consistently 16 million for the 2 years.
Yeah.
So if we look at our total revenue envelope, our total budget as compared to other institutions, education sector being the third, is it not sufficient? Or with given our situation, is it the problem why for example, is it why the teachers at the University of Liberia putting down their chalks? Is it the reason why we're having intermittent strikes from public schools teachers? Monrovia Consolidated School System has around $4 million of the budget. About that of the budget within the education sector. The William V. S. Stockman University has about around the same $4 million of the budget. Now, that may not be enough, but within the context of our revenue envelope and education being the tier highest of the total budget, this is what they're getting. Is it what is leading to the situation, the trend that we have?
Dr. Gompo. Let Dr. Gompo answer that, and then I will.
This money is not relatively enough.
I think Mr. Eastman has a very good point. You know, you cannot have a great future if you do not invest in education. And the population is growing. As your population grows, your school age population is also growing. Accordingly, your investment in education, which is already underfunded, has to grow. This idea of a free tertiary education that was announced, okay, seemed to be like it was ill-advised. Because, I mean, there's no free lunch. There's no free lunch. And it's not just a matter of a desire to look good. If you want to do something in terms of doing good for people, you have to have the spending. So it's like, you know, you be an authority who provide inspection over maybe restaurants. And then because you have some power, you go to a restaurant and then announce that you know, all
Dr. Gompo, let me hold you there. Let me ask a question. I know Eastman's question has stayed there hanging, but let me ask you a question. Is it what is happening with our education sector? Is it that the government is not spending more money into education? Is that what is happening?
Well, for education to improve, so many things need to happen. The spending in terms of the resources have to be there, and the spending also has to be targeted strategically. So you can spend a lot. If you don't spend in the right place, or you don't, you know, purchase the right kind of equipment and the right kinds of technology, the spending may not have the kind of impact that is needed. But first of all, you have to be willing to invest in education. So Mr. Eastman has a point. There is a gap between where we need to be and where we are. And then when we create a situation where the university was collecting maybe between $5 and $7 million in terms of other fees and tuition that it was collecting, adding that to what the government was funding. So the government budget, I mean, in terms of university budget, were around $15 million at the time you announced the free education. So when you say things are free, which is good, you must be prepared to take over the expenses. Okay, so if you were collecting, if the university were collecting additional $5 to $7 million, which was supplementing what was coming from government, making their budget to be maybe around 20-something million, and then you come in and say education is now free. So now you should pay for that tuition that you have now made free. And I think it's ill-advised. The thing is, clearly, we need to help people. We need to help very poor people. But some people can pay their own tuition. So why come in and say, you know, you got ministers, deputy ministers, and so many people who work for significant agencies in that country. And some of them have relatives who are going to the university and they can afford to pay. So why should we be paying tuition? Why should we make tuition free for them? And we don't have the money to give the additional funding to the university. So that's the problem. And it's not only at the University of Liberia. It's happening at the community colleges around the country. So I think that whole strategy, basically what you've done is that the need of the educational institution has been increased, but their funding allocation has not been increased appropriately. So what is going to happen? Quality is going to suffer. You see, because you don't have money to buy a truck, you don't have money to pay for electricity, and so you have the kind of pressure now that is building where, you know, the teachers are complaining, the students are complaining, and the conditions are declining.
Dr. Gompo.
Let me add to that.
Dr. Gompo, the University of Liberia, I wish we had a 5-year trend budget to discuss, because the University of Liberia's budget was increased by 2 million, from 14 million to 2 million in the last 2 years. Okay, so that was, I believe, a discussion that was held, that money that is being collected. Okay, because I know for a fact that there was a discussion that was held that, oh, yes, you're taking the school fees away because we're using this school fee to subsidize some of the expenses. So I believe, and I'm not sure about that. I believe what moved the University of Liberia budget from 14 million to 16 million is some of that, just to compensate for some of that. That's why the budget was moved.
But that is not adequate, though. That's not adequate in terms of the
here's what I want.
But
here's what I want
the
to say.
question then is, what is adequate? Because education, okay, let's look at education as a whole. Education as a whole is around 14% of the budget. That's a third sector.
That's great. Let me add to that.
Sector.
Right?
So if they move it, that means they have to. So what is your suggestion relative to the revenue envelope that we have? What is your suggestion? And I'm trying to.
Here's the problem.
I'm trying to ask another question. James Ismail is asking here, and
hold on 1 second.
How can you make free education? Okay, no, not that question.
We will take those questions later. Here's the problem here, right? You are right that the allocation for for education is the third item on the list at 14%. Mm-hmm. That does not mean the revenue allocated for that is not enough. But the question is, how are we making use of that money that is being allocated towards the university, right? And that's what the problem lies.
Good question.
The question now becomes, if you're allocating that much towards education, which is 14%, 80 million, right? And you're having all these problems where the facility are not being maintained, right? Which Dr. Gompo alluded to perfectly, because you took away the fees that students were paying, which was subsidizing part of that cost. You have to now make additional costs towards that. But in addition to that, you have to hold people accountable. That you have to make sure that the money you're putting into the education is doing what it's supposed to do. That if facilities are not being maintained, that they're being maintained. There are part of the budget that should go towards facility. There's part of the budget that should go towards anything that was keeping the education functioning the way it used to, or even better, right? But that is not happening. So you can take even that entire revenue that we're collecting and throw it into the education system. If it's not yielding any tangible result, which is, as we mentioned, Dr. Gompo mentioned earlier, which is quality education for the future of the country, that means you're just technically throwing your money away. It's like you're making $150,000 a year, but you're just spending it all on credit card because you're taking on so much debt, right? So the part what I think needs to happen is the government need to hold people accountable. You spent 80 million on education. Make sure if you have given them this level of autonomy. Let me land. If you're giving them this level of autonomy, where you say, I'm just going to put this $80 million in your charge in the education system, manage it accordingly, and you're seeing year over year that no result is happening, then you take the macro level approach, right? Now you hold people accountable. It says, okay, I've been giving you the autonomy to do this, but we're not yielding this specific result. So now I'm going to ask of you a detailed report of how this money is being spent on there. That's the problem that we're having. It's not that we're not spending enough money. It's just that the money we're spending, we're not spending it the right way.
Yeah. The question that Gabriel, Dr. Gompo, the question I wanted to ask is, the University of Liberia teachers, and even sometimes the Moria Consolidated School System teachers, sometimes they go on strike, they put their chalks down. Why do they normally put their chalks down for? The two biggest thing to me was their pay, whether it's enough or it was not coming at all. Why do they put their chalks down? Because of facilities, because teacher-student ratio?
Well, I think the reason why these people go on strike and you have all these instabilities at this institution should be obvious. Working conditions, compensation, lack of respect. So if you are working somewhere and you're taking 3 months to get paid, or you go to a classroom and you have to bring your own chalk, you go to the classroom and the classroom is not well kept. I was a faculty at the University of Liberia, and I know the conditions over there. I know some of the conditions over there, and if it's gotten worse than what they are, what they were.
I taught at the university for 12 years too.
Okay, and what kind of facility did you have? What kind of support did you have in terms of computer in the classroom? I mean, I have university, classes here.
I had to buy my own books and supply them.
Okay, you go to the classroom.
I mean, look at that.
And every classroom has a computer on the desk, and those computers are, connected to the internet. The entire building is Wi-Fi connected and all of that. And our students have to compete with the rest of the students in the world.
Yeah.
So if we're going to prepare these students, we have to be willing to invest in education. I agree with Gabriel. There is a problem of mismanagement, there's a problem of corruption and whatever, and that's where the transparency institutions come in. If you put that slide up, you will see that we're spending more money on those institutions. Their percentage has gone up, whereas education percentage has gone down. Okay, so then what is happening in the public administration sector? That their proportion of the budget went up, and then the proportion for education went down between the 2 years. What is happening?
Exactly.
So it is not just corruption per se, but the priorities as reflected in the way in which we allocate the scarce resources is also not consistent with what government.
Yeah, but Dr. Gompo, I will also agree with you. I will also agree with you because yes, public administration went up by about 11 million, whereas security sector remained the same, where our education went down by about 3 million, and then health sector also went down by about 10 million.
Right. And another thing too about the education sector, especially when you announce that it's now free, there will be some students who will leave who could have gone to private school, who will now come to government school.
It's overcrowded. Yeah.
Right. And the population is increasing. So the number of students you have to provide services for is also going up.
It's going to be
But
higher.
the number of people in the legislature is not increasing. The number of people in some of the other agencies should not necessarily increase because they're doing the same work and their clientele have not really changed that much. But at the university and other places, their student population may have gone up by a significant percentage, especially after that announcement. So then you got to be prepared to match their resources. I mean, in terms of increase.
Dr. Gompo, let's look at some specific areas here. Okay. Right. I know education is one of the things, health is one of the things as compared to public administration. But agriculture, why is agriculture 1%?
I mean, that's a good question. That's a good question. I mean, it is inconsistent with what the government says its priority, is. Okay, agriculture, which feeds the people, which helps to lower the cost of food, which helps to make us less input dependent.
Right.
Which when we become input when we become less dependent on import, then we save on the capital leaving the country for buying food from abroad, and that helps our exchange rate and help our available foreign currency and all of that.
Right.
If we keeping it at 1%, and I think maybe part of the factor is that it could also be that they're getting agriculture does get some assistance, foreign assistance from USAID and other agencies, but still, I think they need more, and it could be that they're counting on those grants from other, countries to help out.
Yeah.
But agriculture needs more, and we need to move towards agricultural modernization, which will require more. It doesn't just require, expanding the farm, but we need to bring new technology into agriculture.
Yeah.
We need to educate the farmers. I believe that that we should get to the point where we get professional agriculturists assigned to each village, to each town in our country where agriculture is occurring. Let these people go to the farm with the farmers and help them to get access and knowledge to the use of new, not just necessarily machines per se, but just different seedings or different seeds, different planting methods, that will help to improve agricultural productivity. I think we need to begin to think about that, and that requires some sacrifice within the budget. We need to allocate their funding in a way that it clearly reflects how much we prioritize food production and food security in the country.
Yeah.
So another thing I see on the budget is what Gabriel, you wanted to add something to the?
No, I just wanted to add one thing, that I will also add that I think we should actually look at reviving the agriculture bank, to supplement that, because I mean, I agree with everything that Dr. Gompu said, right? If we put, let's say hypothetically, we go up with his idea and put agriculturalists in those villages, right? You got to have a mean to subsidize those people, those farmers or cooperatives that will be in those villages producing food. And I think we need to look at reviving the agriculture bank. I think it was existing at one point. I think it went debunked, right? And I think we should look at reviving it to really, because 1% year over year, we will continue down this trend. We can't feed ourselves. We spend all our money outside importing rice into the country. There are people that even go outside the country to go buy pepper and stuff like that, right? We should be producing these basic things within the country. So I will add that we also need to look at reviving the agriculture bank as well to provide some level of capital.
I fully agree.
As Dr. Gompu said, and I think I heard, I can't remember who, but people from government said that because the agriculture sector is receiving a lot of these donor funds, and I know I work at the Ministry of Agriculture briefly as a consultant there on the financial side. Yes, of course, for the donor funds. There are a lot of money, millions and millions of dollars that have been pumped into at different stages after the war, from small scale to tree crops to, rubber, to different things. Okay, so these monies have been spent in the region, so in the sector to sort of give us a leeway. But again, I can tell you, because I did a report and a lot of people were not happy. The money, these millions of dollars that are sent to this sector, from that analysis, is only about 10% that actually get to the end users, the farmers.
Then that is a problem within itself.
Right? It's only 10% of that money, that millions of donor money that come in. It is not government corruption. It is not corruption.
So where does the rest go? Where does the rest of the money go?
It's the layers. 90%. It's the layers that have been created. First of all, they will bring in the NGO situation. There's a body that has to eat a percentage of that money.
Right.
All right. So they bring in international non-profit because they think, Liberia don't have the capacity, blah, blah, blah. So you bring the institution. Say if you brought $20 million, that $20 million, portion of that $20 million is given to the people to set up their office and everything to oversee the project. Then you have the project management unit at the Ministry of Agriculture that also has to hire people, of course. Then you have the other things that go on the ground. Then when you miss, agriculture is such that it's time sensitive. when you miss procurement process also, right?
Jesus.
But when you miss the season for the planting to start through the waste of time to procurement process, people delaying and all that stuff, when you miss it, then say for example, you buying cassava sticks,
Right.
or you buying agricultural what do you call it, fertilizer.
Yeah.
And you don't buy it on time. When the season starts, when the season passes, there's nothing. Those goods will come and they will be in warehouse. They'll have to wait for the next agricultural season, and they might spoil. So at the end of the day, the benefit of all those money, it only gets to the end users about 10% of the time. The rest of the 90% is in the value chain.
And this is sometimes we categorically just loosely just throw the blame on the government. I agree with you. That is not the part of the. It may not be the problem. The government itself may not be using the money that is allocated towards our sector. But if you look at the process as you just highlighted, right? I know we're over the hour break. We got to go for a break. If you look at the process that you just highlighted, let's say you are in the government and you've noticed, and don't tell me there's nobody in our government who doesn't notice our process, that we the same organization, international organization that gave us the money, they bring their own entities here and establish their own entities. So sometimes even 30% or even 40% of the money that they're giving out towards aid goes towards setting up the their institution. You look at that and look at ways to get around that, right? You look at that and say, guys, if you're giving us this amount of money and part of it is going towards setting up your own entities, then we don't then and even if you're taking that 10% is going towards the agriculture sector, you look at eventually weaning yourself off of donors aid, because in reality it's not even helping you. They're only giving you the money and it come and send their people in return to come use it. It's either you fix that, either you tell them that they can't do that, right? These are contracts, these are an agreement. You put in agreement that you will not be responsible for setting up their own entities, or you get rid of that eventually, like in the long term. And this is why I keep, as I said earlier, we need agriculture bank, we need sector banks. I know it's old school from its entirety, like the way it used to be, but in our case, building from scratch like where we are right now, we're primitive in terms of development sector standpoint, right? We need agriculture bank to get away from that. Say 10% going towards those the agriculture sector of aid is not going to cut it. We're going to be looking at that depending on foreign donors aid, and we're going to be continue talking about this for year over year. I'm sure what you just highlighted, somebody within the government knows that. There are even one or two people with high accessibility to the president knows that can advise him to say, hey, this is what's happening. We need to get around it. We need to see how we can get around it, or work a way towards it. Work a way, a process around getting, work a process in place of getting around that to really have an impact in the agriculture sector, because this is a problem. Food security is a problem within itself, and I think if what you've highlighted is the truth, it's a fact. We have to find solution around it, and this is why I think sometimes people look at it and they just throw the blames on the government. Say it's the government. It's the government. Yes, I agree with you. It may not be their fault, but they have the ability to do something about it.
Yeah, I think Gabriel, you are making some significant points, and Alex also raised some good points. However, I think that the international community and donors, the way they do their accounting, sometimes really overstate what they're actually doing for the country. Just as he stated, if you give me $10 million, but then you bring in the whole structure, I must buy all of the whatever I need to buy from you, and then you bring in consultants that get salaries equal to $2 million, and in the end you announcing that you gave me 10 million, but then 7 million is going back to you because of all different things you brought. Then the question is that fair, and is it correctly stated? But we have to take responsibility, and that's where leadership comes in.
Exactly.
We have enough history to identify why these things have not worked, and how to revise the system to make it more effective and more efficient.
Right.
When you look at Rwanda is, has been a good case of how to be proactive in engaging donors and basically be prepared to say no if you're coming to my country. And in the end, it is my record that will be out there as being the recipient of this aid. So I should play a significant role in deciding how this aid enter the country and how this aid is implemented. Rwanda has done that effectively and basically turned some aid donors down. If you don't do it a certain way to benefit our people, then you can carry your money.
Keep your money, right?
I'm running and say, okay, we're prepared to meet you at where you want us to meet you. Liberia has not been able to do that because we have been presenting ourselves as highly desperate, and we just accept anything. We just sign on the dotted line. Sometimes they come in, all of the agreements already drafted, and then people don't even read those things carefully. And they just sign onto it. So I agree with you. We need to be proactive. I think the whole idea of a bank that will be dedicated to agriculture, and not only agriculture, to investment in the country, to business development. I think that I agree with very strongly, and it's actually at the center of what I think should be on any serious future leadership's agenda in terms of the financial aspect. So I fully support that.
Yeah. Alex.
Yeah, the thing is, one of the things that we should be doing, because for example, when I was consultant at the Ministry of Agriculture, one of the things I was able to do in one of those projects, in one of those new projects, was to sit down with the donors, right, and the NGOs, and take a critical look on the budget, right. And in one instance, I was able to cut it down by $3 million. That okay, why this other thing? Why this other thing? Why this other thing? All right, and that is why we, as a nation, we're supposed to be able to galvanize the capacity, right? And because one of the things that people use on us is that, oh, well, you ain't had a capacity, you just come from war, you ain't got a capacity. Well, that is why we're able to galvanize our best and brightest, and
that's what I was just going to say.
Funds.
We do have the talent
to be able to fund our own stuff, so that we are not at the mercy of donors. And no, we have to work with international partners. Right. But at the same token, we have to come up strong as well. Be able to analyze these numbers, and analyze the reason why we're supposed to deal with this person, that person, the reason why we have to cut down some of these layers. Right. So that most of the funding can end up to the appropriate places. Right. Absolutely. If there's agriculture in this instance, so that at least 60% of the money will go to the end users, to the agriculture, rather than going to all these different layers. That is why we need ourselves. Right. And some of those things, I mean, we try to do them, but again, we need to raise the funds. We need to get the capacity going. But we need to pivot a little bit. Before we do that, we need to take a break.
Yeah, we
come to the questions. But before we do that, let me ask you a question. We have so many entities that are sucking on the budget as well. For example, I see in the budget that we have LEC, for example, taking $5.6 million.
Right.
Why should LEC be on a budget when LEC should be a business?
It's a revenue entity within itself. Yeah.
Should be given the government subsidy. Because National Port Authority, airport, FDA, LPRC, all these state-owned enterprises should be giving water and sewer, should be giving the government money. Why is LEC on our budget? You tell me. Dr. Gompo, what do you say about that one?
Well, LEC is in the budget because the government agreed for LEC to be in the budget. So, right, in the sense that there are international.
We can take the slide down.
Right, there are international partners, especially the Americans, that have been involved in working with Liberia in building electricity or in bringing back electricity. So in those agreements, there are understanding reached between the LEC, the international donors, and the Liberian government. And sometimes they ask the Liberian government that, look, in order for us to bring this investment to LEC, this is what we want you to contribute, because we need to rebuild LEC. It would take time for LEC to rise to the capacity to be independent and to be a revenue generator.
So even 2021, they stay on the budget?
Is what?
I agree with you, but if so, even 2021, they stay on the budget?
Well, I mean, that question should go to the finance minister and some of the other people. But the point of the matter is that.
But that's not LEC alone. There are so many other entities that are who are in the government budget.
Right. So the thing is that you remember LEC has some security implications because you cannot keep the place down.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So now, when the international partners come in and say we're bringing X amount and we want you to continue to give this portion, then the government now sits back and say, okay, you have to look at your other needs before you agree. So if you sit there and agree and that you commit yourself to giving LEC a certain amount of money, then now you have to allocate it. So, and it also could be reflecting some of the problems at LEC. You know,
LEC should not be on the budget as a going concern.
I agree with you. I absolutely agree with you.
They're on the budget because of their own weakness. The institution is weak. The institution needs time to recover. And are you helping it to recover? When you continue to do a lot of politics in these agencies, you will continue to suffer these problems. Who's on the board? Most of the board members, technical places, these should not be political positions.
Mm-hmm.
You see? These people need to come with an agenda. They need to have a timeline for delivery, and if they're not delivering, we fire them.
Yep.
See? Then people say, well, is it? But if not, they will continue to suck on the public resources.
Yeah.
You see?
Well, let's take a break, and we'll come back. We'll just look at the entities that make up the latter budget. Then we'll come to some of the questions here, and then we can wrap this thing up.
Yeah.
Answer. Let's take a break.
At Focus on Liberia, we discuss everything Liberia, from education to politics, art.
The future of money is here. eWallet allows you to pay, transfer, and shop online, all from one place, your phone.
Ladies and gentlemen, again, welcome to Focus on Liberia, where we talk everything finance and economics. Today, we're doing a deep dive into the expenditure component of the revenue. We've been talking for the last 40, I think just over an hour, just on various aspects of the expenditure part of the revenue. Today, again, we're lucky to have Dr. Gompu here. Again, my name is Gabriel. I have my co-host here, Alex Cuffy. I think for now, we're about to go into maybe take comments from the audience.
Yeah, before we take the comments, let's look at the entities that make the at least 5% of the budget. Then we'll come to
let's do that, and then we'll take the comments. Thank you. Yeah.
Andre, please bring that slide again. Yep.
That's it.
So,
yep.
There you have it. The budget as it is for the last 2 years, the Ministry of Finance, at least this was extracted for entities that make up at least 5% of the budget.
Mm-hmm.
So then all other entities are the ones that are down there with the 44%. So the Ministry of Finance, the Ministry of Health, the National Legislature, the Ministry of Education, the Ministry of Justice, the Ministry of Public Works, and then the others. All right? So you don't have agriculture there, of course, because some of the discussion we had, but you have Ministry of Finance, $110 million the current year that we're discussing, 2020, 2021. You have Ministry of Health, $53 million. National Legislature, about $45 million. You got Ministry of Education, about $42 million. Ministry of Justice, that's the security sector. So you have, here you have health, you have education, you have public works. That is roads and other things. The only thing you don't have here is Ministry of Agriculture. So some of our key entities are here, right? It's just that we have this national legislature that is in there, which I don't know whether they should be in there, but they are in there. They make up a good percentage, at least. They make up what? 7 or 8% of the budget. About 7.8%. So I'm just running it up to 8% of the budget, as compared to Ministry of Public Works, 5.7%, as compared to education, as compared to the security sector. Dr. Gompu.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so we just saw that, and still there is more work that needs to be done so that our budget can reflect our priorities. You see Ministry of Finance in there with a significant proportion. But what I can say is that although Ministry of Finance is leading the way, that is not translating into these employees at the Ministry of Finance. Even though here you see 19%, what is going on there is that some of those monies that the government is obligated to pay internationally gets put into the Ministry of Finance budget. So all that debt payment, all those debt payment is not going to people at the Ministry of Finance, but because you borrow so much and you have all these debt payment obligation, and the Ministry of Finance is supposed to be the agency doing the transaction, so they just put that under Ministry of Finance. You see, so I think that's one of the factor. I don't think it's because salary is increasing at the Ministry of Finance. I don't think so, but we can look at it in detail. I think what is disappointing there is the fact that only few of those agencies have an increase in their budget as a proportion, and that is happening at the legislature. So what new is the legislature doing? You know, what new laws is the legislature making? How is their service to the country rising that we're paying them more and we're paying them a greater proportion of our budget?
Right.
Look at health. In the time of the pandemic, the proportion of the budget going to health has gone down. So how are we going to end poverty if we're not increasing the allocation to our hospitals? We are not finding ways to modernize and bring better technology to our hospitals so that people do not have to go to Ghana and travel to other countries, taking away money from our country
economy
to be sent to Ghana for health services. We need to invest more in health. If we were to invest $2 to $5 million every year in buying health equipment, within 5 to 6 years, I believe we'll have some of the best, equipment that we need for health, and our citizens will not have to suffer by traveling to India and other places just to get to use basic health machinery. We got the medical doctors, we got people who have the training, but we have to provide them with the technology. And so when you look also at, I think another area there was public works.
Yeah.
Public works, I think, saw a small increase, but I don't think the shift there is that significant. So it goes back again to our administrators, to our leaders. So we are a developing country. We are emerging from a war. This is the time to sacrifice. This is the time for us to put a significant portion of our resources into investing in the country so that this country can grow faster, so that we can be able to reduce our poverty rate, so that we can make our farmers more productive, so that we can make our people more, secure in terms of health.
Yeah.
That requires that the administrators must take some of the hit. And we cannot do it on the back of civil servants by harmonizing their salaries in such a way that we end up reducing their salaries, while at the same time giving more to the top administrators in the legislature. I don't think that's the way to go. It basically leads to a situation where there is more, there's an increase in, or let's say not increase, but a decrease in morale in the public service.
Yeah.
When people, are not getting adequately paid.
Mhm.
You can't be having inflation and at the same time you reducing salaries.
Reducing
Where
salary,
has that-
right? Yeah.
See? So and we got some of the best economists. So why can't we put them to work to understand that, look, you cannot be decreasing salary while you have inflation occurring. You basically undermining the quality of life. And when that happens, people become
Less productive, right?
less productive. They become angry. They
Yeah.
do not have good customer service relations, and morale is low. And when morale is low, you're going to have all kinds of problems.
Yeah.
So I think that thank you for doing that work in terms of basically identifying some of the areas where a significant portion of our budget is going. I think we need, the government needs to restructure, government needs to reprioritize, not just in terms of the plan, but in terms of resource allocation to go hand in hand with the commitment that government has made.
Yeah, let's we got to answer. We got to go to some of the questions, but in the meantime, Dr. Gompu, thank you for that clarification about the Minister of Finance. So that means that maybe something like 92 million in 2020, 2021, and 61 million in 2019, 2020 will be part of that Ministry of Finance budget. That is the debt servicing.
Yes.
So,
At least
okay.
to the
So
best
now
of
we
our
understand.
knowledge. Yeah.
Okay.
Because the debt is not only even just, I think that debt is also international and domestic.
Domestic
Both,
debt, yeah.
All of that is
External and internal.
finance.
Okay, so yeah, that's the Ministry of Finance budget is not just high because the Ministry of Finance is spending the money, but
Right.
like you said, it's the vehicle for the payment. That's the payment. So obviously that money had to come under their budget. Okay, all right.
And it's also possible that the PSRP might also be under there too.
Some of the PSRP might also be under there. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
So if you see the Ministry of Finance budget, which is around 110 million, other things may be included rather, that are not Ministry of Finance related. So we get that. But the question is, why is the legislature so high?
Right. And that's a big question. And I think the legislature play a big role in getting the budget done. And so sometimes they want to have their way.
Mm-hmm.
The executive need to stand up. The executive need to stand up to say, look, if we give you so much, if we give you all you want, we really cannot do our job. We really cannot cater to the needs.
Don't you think because they're plenty anyway, because the representative are having 70 something and they're 100
in a small country as Liberia.
Because the senators are 30 and the representative are 70, I think 74 thereabout.
73
thereabout. So that's 30 plus that 103 or 104 people.
How many
plus their staffs, plus their this, plus
the staff are complaining that they're not even getting paid. So many of the staff have gone on strike. So many, you know that they've had so many protests. The staff are very unhappy. And how many staff do they have? the question is not so much of how many staff you have, but what work are you doing?
Thank you.
We're supposed to pay for delivery. We're supposed to pay for services. We're supposed to pay for impact. Okay? So between last year and this year, how much more work are they doing?
But the people making your law now, they didn't want to make the law.
Yeah, they didn't want to make the law. So how many new laws have they made?
Law that they're not even enforcing.
There's so many.
No, but they're having they're having legislative engagement now.
Yeah. So
30, what is it? $3 million allocation
allocated to people now.
Yeah. So what is legislative?
That's $30,000 engaging with the people.
Yeah. No, I think that's why
30,000 times 130 or 104.
There was 3.6 million. But the point is, they already had their budget before, though. All the traditional areas of the budget are already there. The staff support, the legislative budget office, all of these things, telecommunication, transportation, all those things are already there. Then they came up with that additional line.
You don't think it's about time to redistrict and reduce some of these districting and reduce some of these numbers? And what do we have?
I mean, that's a radical, it will be a radical reform you're talking about there. And
how long are they going from them? Right?
There's so many ways to reform. Because, like, for instance, look at, I think Ghana now has a unicameral legislature, which means that they just have, representatives. I don't think they got it, distributed between Senate and whatever. Okay, so that's a big reform you're talking about there, and it requires. Recently, I engaged.
But Dr. Gompu, what's the difference between? Maybe we'll have this conversation. We need to answer the question because we got 15 minutes to go. What's the difference between the senator? What's the role of the senator and the representative? Why don't we just have few representatives for these people and for these different counties? And that's
why even our representatives there, if you have senators, the same engagement that they're allocating that $6 million for, you're getting paid to do that. That's what your job is. You're supposed to be engaging your constituents.
Yeah, because we have junior senator and senior senator. So why don't the senators do the work? The
thing is, in fact, I engaged my senator, one of my senators from our country recently, and proposed the idea of being able to recall these representatives, because some people go into the house, into the legislature, and they spend 9 years, 18 years,
nothing.
And there's no one law that they've ever proposed or even passed. How in 18 years, 27 years, you never made one law? You're just basically signing concession agreements. Do we need to pay people millions of dollars to be signing concession agreements?
And when they sign concession agreement, another thing. So, but let's move to the questions. Let answer. Just bring the question on. You brought one question on about Dr. Gompu. That question stay on. We're spending 2.6% of our GDP, and the standard should be 6%. Why?
What are we doing? I thought we answered that question before.
Okay, then let's move to something else.
Right, we should be spending more, but in order to spend more, you got to cut from other places. Who are you going to cut? Are you going to cut the legislature? It takes a lot of strength to cut them because they have to sign the budget before it goes into effect. Are you going to cut Ministry of Finance? Well, they play a major role in writing the budget. Are you going to cut the president office? Who office are you going to cut? So,
Dr. Gompu, William King is saying, why Dr. Gompu's solution always in the government? Shouldn't it be about the private sector?
Well, this budget we're discussing is not the private sector budget we're discussing. We came to discuss the government budget. We came to analyze the government budget. We came to look at where the government money is going. It is true that the private sector is critical because through the private sector, we can grow revenue. But through the government now, through this government budget, we can also support the private sector because what? The government regulate the private sector. How are you doing this regulation? We just talked about the issue of the environment and tourism and keeping the city clean. Those things tend to generate private sector activity. If you do not keep the city clean, you don't invest in the city to keep it clean, and new businesses are not opening up. Investors are turned off from the country. They don't want to bring their families into the country because there's a health hazard.
No, but Dr. Gumpu, I don't think you're answering the question. You're complaining. The guy said, "Why is your solutions always generated in the government?" And you said that it's because we are narrowing our focus to discussing the budget. Right. So when you come to the other side, private sector, then you should provide solution. That's his question within the private sector. That's his question he's asking.
But
so what he's asking you is, what would be your own way of driving private sector led growth?
That's in another way of putting it.
Okay, so the private sector led growth, we're saying the same thing in different ways.
Yeah, rather than complaining about whether the city clean or the city dirty, what is your solution?
Okay, from where is the private sector hiring? See, many of the corporations that are coming in are complaining that they cannot find quality workforce. So they're bringing.
So Dr. Gumpu, the question is, what will you do?
That's what we're talking about. Invest in education. Invest in education in a targeted way. Make sure that you educate your citizens in new technologies, vocational education.
Yep.
The investment in the agricultural sector will help to make agriculture expand. It will create agricultural jobs. We need agro businesses where you start processing some of these foods, packaging them, and competing in global agricultural market. All of those things will create private sector jobs. But how do you do those things? You have to invest. We talk about investment in agriculture. We talk about investment in infrastructure development. We talk about investment in new technology in education. All of these.
Dr. Gumpu, how do you invest when you have your revenue envelope so small?
Well, how do you invest when you have your revenue envelope so small?
How do you invest in agriculture?
You do that by looking at, cutting off where some of these facts are in the government. For example, we talk about this increase in personnel salaries.
Right.
What new are they doing? What new jobs are they doing? That your personnel bill has gone up to 50% of the budget. Okay. So when some of those people retire, you don't have to replace them.
A point of correction, it has not gone up to 50%. It is up to 50%. It is reduced from 60% to 50%.
Yeah, but I mean, compared to previous years. Compared when I was in government, I think we're around 30%. You see? And so now they went up to 56% and now they're down to 51%. So I'm talking about compared to previous years. I'm not just talking about compared to 1 year ago. You see? And when they came in
5 years ago, it was 60% of the budget.
Yeah.
Is what?
5 years ago, it was 60%.
Yeah. 5 years ago, it was 60%?
Yeah, it was around the same 60% of the budget.
Yeah, well,
so average is it hovers around the same thing.
Well, maybe increase.
But let's get more questions. These are things
you can find the money. The money is there.
Yeah, these are fallout from the budget discussion we discussed in.
Yeah, but the money is there. We can find it. We can find it if we look carefully.
Yeah.
So what we'll be discussing next Saturday, we'll be discussing about the debt and we'll even start to stretch the budget a little bit. Right. But after that, we'll be talking about opportunities for economic growth, opportunity to grow the budget, and then Dr. Gumpu, now you can come in with your grand plans, right? But today, right now, let's look at the question. The other questions. The other question was government needs to bite the bullet and privatize, part of LEC. Like distribution, LEC should be run as a business.
Yeah, so government need to bite the bullet and
I think we address some of these things.
And privatize part of LEC, like distribution. LEC should run as a business. Let government move their hands from inside. That's
Gentlemen, I think you should read the comments and then you can respond to them.
Read entirely.
The time will take you a lot of time.
Okay, let me jot that down. I think that's
Okay, go ahead.
The problem with privatization.
Any more questions? Let's just read them on the board and let's take them down. I will read the question as he put them. Then let's jot them down.
Okay.
But we finish with the first one about the 2.6.
Yep.
Do we track the effectiveness of spending and investment? This is a measure of performance and should be measured regularly. Spending money and not measuring what you getting is no accountability. Okay, so the effectiveness of what we're spending. Okay.
Yep.
How can you make education free, but then don't increase the education budget? Where would the institution get the funding? Okay.
I think that may have been answered, but we can look at it again.
What would be your opinion if you are requested to structure our current budget to positively impact our economy?
That's a good question. Yeah.
Next, is that all? So where are education and health budget capture? Okay, I think we're there with this one. There is an investment budget. I think we're there with this one.
Yeah, so those will be it, gentlemen.
Okay.
Okay.
So Dr. Gompo, the first one is to privatize LEC and remove the government from in it to make it a revenue, right? Right. Like, how will you? Right.
I think in theory privatization sounds interesting, but in practice it is difficult to do, and it can lead to increased corruption, in the sense that when you try to privatize, for example, so let's say you want to sell LEC.
Mm-hmm.
What's the price of LEC? How do you evaluate LEC? What is the market value of LEC? There is not a good market there for you to really evaluate and say what LEC is actually worth. And when you ask government to do some of this privatization, what ends up happening is that people who have inside connections end up getting sweetheart deals. Okay, they sell these assets to them for pennies on a dollar, which is state asset. And those people can go and make huge amount of profit. Sometimes they just turn it over, they resell it to somebody else. But as we said, the LEC has some security implications.
That was going to be my point, right?
When it is purely a private sector enterprise, that private individual can decide to shut it down and walk away, right? Because that's they own the company. You can't force them to keep the lights on. Mm-hmm. Okay, and if you know the person who bought the place decided that, hey, you know, this thing is not making money, I'm shutting it down, the lights could go off and your whole country could go into darkness. And at the same time, there's also the employment implication. Somebody buys off the company and they decide, hey, I don't need all these people. How did these people come here? I'm going to downsize them.
Dr. Kompu, I got to hold you there, right? Because what the question is, and what you're trying to allude to is, what the question is, he's not saying sell LEC. It's like you're saying sell NPA. He's saying, for example, you go right to Ghana, right? Distribution is privatized. So in an area, you will have, let's say, in Tamale, that different company there. LEC stay maintains, the electricity corporation stay maintains
the oversight
infrastructure.
Right.
They stay a company or a government health entity. They stay there. They own the power grid. But the distribution of the power grid is privatized so that different people feed off the power grid and take care of the distribution in different areas, right? But LEC will still be there. LEC will be getting money from these people. So I think that's what he's trying to say.
Well, then that's partial privatization. That's you gotta make it clear. That's partial privatization. When you privatize, when you move something, when you move an asset from the public sector to the private sector,
Complete sale.
it's basically
complete
you're
sale.
getting, you give it to the private sector, you turn it over to the private sector. You're talking about
Yep.
a partial privatization, where you're saying, okay, we don't want to be in the distribution business, so let private investors come in and take over the distribution business and so forth. Okay, I mean that's already being done, and they're not doing it very well. They're not doing it.
Okay,
Here's
so
what I would- here's what I want to add to that. I think it can be done. It can be privatized. There's if we're concerned about the citizen of whether the citizen will benefit from it, it can be done in a way where the bid is put out for Liberians, whether in the diaspora or locally, to participate in it, right? Where you open the bid for a Liberian to participate in that bid. However, the LEC, as Alex alluded to, can maintain oversight of the regulation, the regulating aspect of it, right? That could be how much people get charged per kilowatts of electricity, how much the new owner can actually increase the price over year, given what's the inflation is in the country. So they can privatize it and maintain ownership of the regulation and oversee it. Yes, I agree with you. There could be serious security implication there, right? Where now we're in a digital age, people can hack into the power grid and shut the entire country off, right? So this is why I think it could be privatized, but the government can maintain ownership of the regulating aspect of it. But it can be done, and I think if you're managing something where you're not making any money off of it, the government is putting money into running LEC right now. We all on this panel and most Liberians actually do agree that it should be a revenue generating entity within the government, right? And if they're not doing that, you look at other ways. We can't keep sitting on something that is not making money. We're pouring money into it, and we know it has a capability to be a revenue generating state-owned enterprise of the government. So I think it can be privatized, given that you make Liberian equitable, to have equity in that ownership share, where we don't go make sweet deals to people that work in the government, but also allow the government through the LEC entity to maintain regulatory body over the distribution of the electricity within various counties as well.
We're on
I think LEC is already partially privatized to some extent. It could go further. But the management of LEC right now is not purely in the hands of Liberians. I think there's either a Canadian or some foreign firm there that appoint the CEO, and their salaries are huge.
Right now, the question is futuristic. Let's not keep dwelling into the what is happening now in the negativity, but let's dwell into how can we change this thing. And so we're on the 2 hours mark. So this question is a prelude to maybe 2 weeks from now.
2 weeks from now. Yeah.
The last question I'm going to ask, so we can wrap up this thing. We're already after 2 o'clock. 2 hours. Dr. Gompu, this question is for you from one of the questions. It says, how do you restructure the government budget to impact the economy?
Yeah.
Okay, but I thought you said this is what we'll be doing in the future.
It will be a prelude.
It will be just give them.
How do you prelude that discussion?
Yeah, I think
in 1 minute.
Right. I think to impact development, we basically have to first make the development agenda.
Thank you.
That emphasize investment in some strategic sectors. So agriculture, tourism, industrialization, those are the engines of jobs or engine of job creation, and also the financial sector as well. As we said, capital is highly expensive in Liberia right now.
Yep.
And if we want the economy to grow, if we want the economy to develop, we have to find ways to bring down the cost of capital.
Yep.
which means that the financial sector has to be managed efficiently and effectively so that inflation can reduce, so that there is more credibility and more capital can be brought into the banking system.
Yep.
People can stop saving their money under their mattresses and bring it into the system.
The banking
With
sector.
that, interest will come down and inflation will come down, and there will be more circulation of money within the economy. So the financial sector is important, industrialization, so that we can start making some things, the agricultural sector. So those priorities need to be set up, and in education as well, so that we have the strongest labor force that we can have. When you have those things and the budget is allocated or structured in such a way that most of our money are going in those directions,
Prioritize. Right.
we're more likely to grow, and we're more likely to grow in a balanced way so that more and more people can be actively in the workforce, contributing to revenue generation, and then contributing to further growth in our economy and with respect to employment and also the decrease in poverty. So, I mean, that's a 1 minute response.
That's brilliant. Yeah.
So that's good. But so for another 1 minute, you try to talk about the budget. So then that good answer you provided, how will you restructure the budget to allow that to happen?
Okay, so to restructure the budget, you basically have to face the areas where the budget is spending so much money and is not getting much return. So you look at the public administration sector, and it's mostly the legislature. And then you look at the executive as well, where the fat is, especially at the top, those ministers and those leaders' offices. You really get to the point of reducing their budget. That's where the harmonization really needs to be. And then you increase civil servants' compensation. You also find ways to encourage attrition, or I know what you call it, departure from employment. So those people who retire, I will not replace them. You see, so that you can reduce the workforce, and then you make them, you provide more training, make them more efficient and more productive. I think if you do that, you will be able to cut some costs. You will be able to generate additional resources that could go into education, that could go into agriculture, that could go into infrastructure development, and then you can expand tourism as well, and the banking sector.
Yeah. Once again, that's just a prelude for the conversation to come. So just get ready, Dr. Gompu, and 2 weeks from now but we'll come back on next Saturday to discuss to expand on the budget discussion. I mean the expenditure discussion, but especially to talk about the debt and the debt repayment and all that stuff. So again, let's get ready for that. We'll be talking about. We have an extended discussion on the expenditure and with particular emphasis on the debt side. Yeah. Okay, Gabriel, I'll leave it with you now for you to close.
No, I think we should wrap up by now. I think we're well over the hour 30-minute we allocated.
Yeah, I said you should close.
Yeah. No, thank you, Dr. Gompu. Thank you for again taking your time to come here to chat with us. As I said before, I know you're very busy, but we'll like 2 weeks from now we'll be calling on you, to talk about the way we can grow the budget. And thank you for always taking the time to join us. For me, I think I want to close with this, right? If I may just give my closing statement, I want to close with this. As I said earlier, we're not. What we do here is more about education. We want to educate. Sometimes we might dive into things and criticize here a little bit, but we're looking at it from an objective point of view. Politics, I know some of you tend to look at things from a political standpoint. For us, we're not looking at it from that light. We're just calling a spade, and doing what we're doing, looking at numbers and making sense of numbers. So again, without going too deep into that, thank you guys for taking your time to join us wherever you are. I know we told you we're going to be here for an hour and a half. We went over almost 2 hours, but again, this is always an engaging conversation, and we look for you guys to challenge us always and come with your comments. And today we weren't able to open the phone line, but hopefully next week we'll be able to do that. Again, thank you for taking your time to join us. We look forward to seeing you next week. Same place, same time, but this time we'll just go a little further into the expenditure component again, as we did earlier today. So without further ado, Dr. Gompu, would you like to give a closing statement?
Yeah, thank you so much for the opportunity. It's always engaging to talk about Liberia, and it's always enlightening to be responding to these questions. It forces us to put on our thinking cap. Liberia is a country with great potential. It has great human beings, and I think with appropriate investment in them, so that they can become the human capital that they need to be, we have the sky's the limit for Liberia. I think Liberia can lead the way in Africa. We're a long way from there, but we can get there. So I think this conversation is healthy. I think we're on the right path, and we can just be hopeful that the future will be bright for Liberia.
Amen.
Thank you, Dr. Gompu, and thank you, the viewers and who view the program, and those who will view the program after this. To those who put their comments and their questions and things like that, we appreciate that. We ask you next Saturday to come on, and Saturday's going. This program is going to continue. I apologize for changing location because the weather here is good and nice, and the Weffy is doing some barbecue, and a lot of movement of people in the house. So I had to change.
You didn't have to do that to us, please.
A lot of movement of people in the house. There's some things going on, juicy things going on out there. So I had to come back to the dark area.
Right.
So thank you, Dr. Gompu, and then viewers and everybody. We look forward to seeing you next Saturday and the Saturdays to come. Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you so much.
We are Liberia. Liberia is our home. Liberia people. Liberia.